Sometimes life feels like a series of battles, leaving behind scars visible or hidden that remind us of the pain we've endured. Broken relationships, shattered dreams, failed opportunities, or even wounds inflicted by our own mistakes. These moments can leave us feeling defeated, burdened, or unworthy. But I am here to remind you of something powerful. God is undoing the damage. God's power extends beyond our understanding, and when we allow ourselves to trust in something greater than ourselves, we tap into a source of limitless strength and renewal. Life often feels like a relentless wave of challenges, uncertainties, and pain. It is in these moments when our strength feels inadequate and our efforts seem futile that we are reminded of the power that resides beyond us, the divine power of God that can undo the damage we could never fix on our own. When life feels heavy and the burdens seem unmovable, our instinct is often to rely on our own abilities, our own plans, and our own timing. We exhaust ourselves trying to repair what has been broken, to reverse what has gone wrong, or to reclaim what has been lost. But there comes a moment when we realize our human efforts fall short. No matter how strong we think we are, there are wounds that only God can heal, brokenness that only God can mend, and circumstances that only God can turn around. It is in this realization that we find freedom, because trusting the power beyond ourselves is not a sign of weakness, but a declaration of faith. This trust requires surrender, a letting go of control, and an acknowledgement that we cannot do it alone. For many, this is the hardest step. Our pride whispers that we should have all the answers, that we should be strong enough, capable enough, wise enough to fix our lives. But trusting God means setting aside pride and stepping into humility, knowing that the Creator of the universe holds our lives in His hands and that His wisdom far exceeds our own understanding. Trusting God means recognizing that His ways are higher than our ways and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. What may seem like a setback to us might be a setup for something greater, something beyond what we could ever imagine. There is a peace that comes with this trust. It doesn't mean that challenges will disappear overnight, or that the pain will instantly fade. But it means we are no longer carrying the weight alone. When we trust the power beyond ourselves, we are tapping into the promise that God is not only able to undo the damage, but also able to use it for our good. The very things that seem to be breaking us can become the building blocks for our growth, for our strength, and for our testimony. God doesn't waste pain. He doesn't ignore our tears or overlook our struggles. Instead, He gathers every broken piece, every shattered dream, and every wounded part of our hearts, and He begins the process of restoration. This process of undoing the damage is often slow and unseen, but it is always certain. We might not notice it at first, and there may be times when it feels like nothing is changing. But just because we can't see God working doesn't mean He isn't moving on our behalf. He is shifting things in the spiritual realm, aligning circumstances and preparing hearts in ways that we could never orchestrate. Trusting God means having faith in the unseen, believing that even in the silence, He is still present, still powerful, and still at work. Trusting the power beyond ourselves also means recognizing that we don't have to have it all figured out. We don't have to have the answers or the solutions. It's okay to not know the next step, as long as we know the one who is guiding us. God doesn't require perfection from us. He simply asks for our trust. He asks us to lean on Him, to seek Him, and to place our hope in Him. And when we do, we begin to experience a transformation that goes beyond the undoing of damage. We experience a renewal of our minds, a strengthening of our faith, and a deepening of our relationship with Him. One of the most profound aspects of trusting God is that it allows us to release the need to understand everything. There are things we will never fully comprehend, such as why certain pains were allowed or why certain paths were blocked. But trusting the power beyond ourselves means letting go of the why and embracing the what now. It means choosing to move forward in faith, believing that God's plan for us is good and that His purposes will prevail. As we trust God, we begin to see His fingerprints in the details of our lives. We notice how certain doors closed to protect us, how certain delays worked in our favor, and how certain trials prepared us for the blessings ahead. This trust doesn't make life easy, but it makes it meaningful. It shifts our perspective from one of despair to one of hope, from one of defeat to one of victory. Trusting God changes the narrative of our lives because it places the pen in the hands of the one who writes the best stories. Ultimately, trusting the power beyond ourselves is an act of faith that acknowledges God's sovereignty and his love for us. It's a declaration that we believe in his ability to undo the damage, to heal what is broken, and to restore what is lost. It's a surrender that leads to peace, a reliance that leads to strength, and a hope that leads to joy. And as we continue to trust, we will see the evidence of his work in our lives. We will witness the transformation, the restoration, and the redemption that only he can bring. Life often feels like an intricate tapestry of moments, some joyful and others deeply painful. When we look at our scars, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, it's easy to feel defined by them. The pain we carry can convince us that these wounds have the final say, that they mark the end of something precious in us. But the truth is, scars are not symbols of defeat, they are evidence of survival. They tell the story of someone who endured, who stood in the fire and lived to tell the tale. And in the hands of God, even the most painful scars become testimonies of healing, redemption, and grace. When we face brokenness, it's natural to feel as though we've reached a point of no return. Relationships crumble, dreams shatter, opportunities slip away, and we are left staring at the pieces, wondering how to make sense of it all. It's tempting to hide those broken pieces, to bury them in shame or regret, thinking they have no value. Yet God sees our brokenness differently. Where we see ruins, he sees potential. Where we see failure, he sees a foundation for growth. God doesn't discard the broken pieces of our lives, he picks them up, lovingly reshapes them, and uses them to create something more beautiful than we could ever imagine. The beauty of God's work in our lives is that it doesn't just repair what is broken, it transforms it. Think of a stained glass window. Its beauty comes not from unbroken perfection, but from fragments of glass brought together into a masterpiece. That is how God works. He takes the shards of our experiences, the heartbreaks, the setbacks, the mistakes, and pieces them together in a way that reveals his glory. The scars we carry become part of the story he is writing, a story not of defeat, but of redemption. Scars remind us of where we've been, but they also remind us of how far we've come. They are a testament to God's faithfulness in the midst of pain. When we look at the wounds that have healed, we can see the fingerprints of his grace. Perhaps it was through a friend who stood by us during our darkest hour, or through a moment of peace that came when we least expected it, or through the quiet whispers of hope that reminded us we were not alone. Every scar carries a lesson, a reminder that even in the deepest valleys, God was present, guiding us toward healing. There is a profound sense of power in realizing that scars do not define us, God does. He doesn't look at our scars and see weakness or failure. He sees resilience, strength, and the potential for growth. In Isaiah 61:3, the Bible speaks of God giving beauty for ashes and joy for mourning. This isn't just a poetic idea, it's a promise. God can take the very things that caused us pain and use them to bring about joy and purpose. Our scars, when surrendered to him, become evidence of his ability to redeem even the most broken parts of our lives. But surrendering our scars to God isn't always easy. It requires vulnerability and acknowledgement that we cannot heal ourselves. We must trust that his plans are good, even when the process of healing feels slow or uncertain. Healing often involves discomfort. It might mean revisiting painful memories, confronting the source of our wounds, or letting go of things we've held on to for too long. But as we allow God to work in us, we begin to see the beauty of his craftsmanship. We begin to understand that the scars we thought disqualified us from joy or purpose are actually the very things he uses to shape us into who we are meant to be. Our scars also hold the power to inspire others. When we share our stories, we give others permission to do the same. There's strength in vulnerability in saying, I've been through this, but I'm still standing. Our scars become a source of hope for those who are still in the midst of their battles. They remind others that healing is possible, that God is faithful, and that no pain is wasted. By sharing the testimony of our scars, we reflect the goodness of God and his ability to redeem every situation. It's important to remember that scars are a sign of healing. A wound that is still open and bleeding is painful, raw, and vulnerable. But when it becomes a scar, it means the healing process is complete. It's a reminder of what once was but no longer is. Scars show us that pain doesn't last forever, that with time and God's grace, we can overcome even the most challenging experiences. If you're carrying scars today, know that they are not a symbol of failure but of resilience. They are proof that you've been through battles and have come out the other side. And if you're still in the process of healing, trust that God is at work, even if you can't see it yet. His timing is perfect, and his love for you is unwavering. He is taking the broken pieces, the pain, and the scars, and he is turning them into something beautiful. In the hands of God, scars become sacred. They are reminders of his power to heal, to restore, and to make all things new. Trust him with your scars. Let him use them to tell a story of grace, redemption, and hope. For in his hands, even the most painful scars become a masterpiece. The damage we experience in life often leaves us feeling hopeless, as though the broken pieces of our lives could never come together again. Mistakes, losses, betrayals, and regrets pile up like rubble around us, and we begin to believe that the mess is permanent. But God's promise is clear. He will restore what has been lost, repair what has been broken, and redeem what seems beyond hope. His power is not limited by our circumstances, and his ability to bring healing and transformation far surpasses anything we could imagine. When we think of restoration, we often picture something being returned to its original state. But God's restoration goes far beyond that. He doesn't merely patch up the broken places or mend what's been torn. He creates something new, something better. The wounds we carry and the scars we bear are not erased but transformed into a testimony of his goodness and power. What once symbolized pain becomes a story of redemption. This is the beauty of God's work. He doesn't discard what is broken. He uses it as the foundation for something extraordinary. There are moments in life when we feel as if we've reached the end, as though the damage we've endured is too great and the losses are too significant. But God's promise to restore means that no situation is beyond his ability to redeem. In Joel 2:25, he says, "I will restore to you the years that the locust has eaten." This is not a vague assurance. It is a divine declaration that every loss, every setback, and every moment of pain will be used for a greater purpose. God doesn't simply replace what was lost. He brings back more than we could have ever expected, in ways that are better than we could have imagined. Restoration begins with faith, the belief that God is not done with us, no matter how bleak the situation may seem. It's easy to look at the broken pieces of our lives and feel overwhelmed. It's easy to believe that the story is over. But faith shifts our perspective. It allows us to see the potential for healing where there seems to be only harm. It enables us to trust that God's plan is bigger than the mess we're facing. Faith doesn't ignore the damage. It acknowledges it and chooses to believe in the God who is greater than it. God's promise to repair what has been broken is not just about fixing the external circumstances of our lives. It's about healing our hearts, renewing our minds, and restoring our spirits. The damage we endure often leaves us carrying burdens of shame, guilt, and regret. We replay our mistakes, dwell on our failures, and convince ourselves that we are beyond help. But God's restoration addresses these internal wounds as well. He speaks to the deepest parts of us, reminding us that we are loved, forgiven, and worthy of his grace. As God repairs what is broken, he often calls us to release what we've been holding on to. Sometimes the greatest hindrance to restoration is our unwillingness to let go of the past. We cling to old hurts, replay painful memories, and resist the healing process because it feels safer to hold on to what we know than to step into the unknown. But letting go is not about forgetting. It's about trusting that God can do more with our brokenness than we ever could. It's about allowing him to take the pieces we're holding on to and turn them into something beautiful. The process of restoration is not always immediate. It often takes time, patience, and a willingness to trust God even when we don't see results right away. There may be seasons where it feels like nothing is happening, where the damage still seems overwhelming, and the healing feels distant. But during these times, God is working behind the scenes in ways we cannot see. He is aligning circumstances, softening hearts, and preparing us for the restoration he has planned. Just because we don't see progress doesn't mean it isn't happening. God's timing is perfect, and his work is always worth the wait. Redemption is the final piece of God's promise. It's the act of taking what seemed hopeless and turning it into something that brings hope. It's the transformation of pain into purpose, of loss into gain, of brokenness into beauty. Redemption means that nothing we've been through is wasted. Every tear, every struggle, every moment of despair becomes a part of the story that God is writing. And his stories always end in victory. What the enemy meant for harm, God uses for good. What seemed like the end becomes the beginning of something new. God's promise to restore, repair, and redeem is not just a hopeful idea, it is a reality that we can experience. It requires us to trust Him, to surrender our brokenness to Him, and to believe that He is able to do immeasurably more than we could ask or imagine. It requires us to let go of the lies that tell us the damage is permanent and to embrace the truth that God is always working for our good. No matter what you've been through, no matter how great the damage may seem, God's promise is for you. He sees every tear, hears every cry, and knows every struggle. He is not distant or indifferent. He is near, ready to restore what has been lost, repair what has been broken, and redeem what seems beyond hope. Trust in His promise, surrender to His process, and watch as He takes the broken pieces of your life and transforms them into a masterpiece. God's promise to restore what was lost is one of the most profound assurances we can hold on to in our lives. So often, the experiences of pain, regret, and loss leave us feeling as if the best parts of our story have been stolen or erased. Whether it's the result of our own choices, the actions of others, or circumstances beyond our control, there's a universal ache that comes from feeling like something precious has been taken away. Yet, in the midst of that ache, God speaks to us through His Word, offering a promise that nothing is beyond His power to restore. Restoration is not just about returning to what once was, it's about creating something even greater. When God promises to restore, He doesn't simply piece together what is broken, He transforms it into something better. It's like a craftsman who takes a shattered vase and not only repairs it but adorns it with gold, turning it into a masterpiece far more valuable than it was before. This is the heart of God's restoration. He doesn't leave things as they were, He makes them better. He takes what was intended to harm us and turns it into something that works for our good. The process of restoration begins with trust. Trust that God sees what you've lost and trust that He cares deeply about it. There are times when we question if God notices our pain or understands the depth of what we're going through. But the truth is, God not only sees it, He feels it. His heart is moved by our suffering, and His desire is to bring healing and wholeness into every area of our lives. In Joel 2:25, He declares, "I will restore to you the years that the locusts have eaten." This promise is not just about material things, it's about restoring joy, peace, hope, and purpose. It's about making us whole again. However, restoration is often a journey, not an instant miracle. It requires patience and faith as we walk through the process. There are seasons when it may feel like nothing is happening, as though the damage is too great or the loss too deep to ever be repaired. But these are the times when God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating events, opening doors, and preparing our hearts for what He is about to do. His timing is perfect, even when it feels slow to us. The waiting is not wasted, it's a part of the process that strengthens our faith and draws us closer to Him. As God restores, He also redefines. Sometimes what we think we've lost is not what we truly needed. We might cling to an idea of restoration that looks exactly like what was taken from us, but God often has something better in mind. He doesn't just return what we lost, He gives us something greater, something that aligns with His perfect plan for our lives. This requires us to let go of our limited perspective and trust in His infinite wisdom. It's not about getting back what was, it's about stepping into what could be. God's restoration is also deeply personal. He meets each of us where we are, addressing our unique needs and circumstances. For one person, restoration might mean the healing of a broken relationship. For another, it could be the redemption of a missed opportunity or the renewal of a dream that seemed dead. Whatever the case, God's promise is tailored to our individual lives, showing us that He knows us intimately and cares about the details of our stories. One of the most beautiful aspects of God's restoration is that it often extends beyond us. When God restores us, He also uses our lives to bring restoration to others. The pain we've endured, the lessons we've learned, and the healing we've experienced become a testimony that can inspire and uplift those around us. Our scars become a symbol of His faithfulness, a reminder that no matter how broken we may feel, God is able to bring beauty from the ashes. This ripple effect of restoration is a powerful way that God works through us to bring hope to a hurting world. It's important to remember that restoration is not just about looking back and trying to reclaim what was lost. It's about looking forward with hope and expectation. It's about believing that God's plans for us are good, that His power to restore is limitless, and that the best is yet to come. Even when we can't see the full picture, we can trust that God is at work, weaving together the threads of our lives into a tapestry of grace and redemption. As we embrace the promise of restoration, we are called to take an active role in the process. This means being open to the new things God wants to do in our lives, releasing bitterness and resentment, and choosing to walk in faith even when the path ahead is unclear. It means trusting that God's restoration is not just about fixing what's broken, but about transforming us into who He created us to be. It's about stepping into the fullness of His purpose for our lives, knowing that He is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. In the end, God's promise to restore is not just about undoing the damage, it's about revealing His glory through our lives. It's about showing the world that no loss is too great, no wound too deep, and no situation too hopeless for His power to redeem. As we trust in Him and embrace His process of restoration, we will see His hand at work, turning our pain into purpose, our sorrow into joy, and our brokenness into beauty. And in that we will know that His promise is true. He will restore what was lost.